Good morning, class. Good morning, class. This is Mr. Lamond, and this is APUS History 12.4. How was America different in 1946? Part 2. What was going on in foreign policy? If you remember back to the beginning of World War II, America had sat entrenched in isolation. We had America First committees and neutrality acts and cash and carry and quarantine and Charles Lindbergh whining and dining with Hitler and John F. Kennedy Sr. talking about appeasement. Everything we could be to be isolated, a return to normalcy of Warren Harding's time. Well, we saw that that was a train wreck and that America, the most powerful nation in the world, could no longer be isolated. So from here on after, we're going to be interventionist and interventionist first. To whom much is given, much is expected. And we know that much is expected of America now. Probably the best example of this is in America joining, creating, establishing the United Nations. Do you remember the name of the group that Woodrow Wilson wanted us to start with his 14 points after World War I? The League of Nations? Well, we didn't join that, and because of that, we have World War II and all kinds of problems. So we decided to join the United Nations. Notice the medallion here at the bottom. Freedom for all peoples, freedom of speech and religion, from want and fear. Do you recognize that? That's FDR's 4 freedoms, which Norman Rockwell had painted and we talked about before the war. So that should give you an idea for how much the United States was involved in this United Nations. We'll see the United Nations play out a lot more as we continue moving through U.S. history. But the key change in American foreign policy after World War II is interventionism. We're going to get involved in basically everything. Another example of the changes in foreign policy in America came after the war in the way that we decided to rebuild Germany and Japan. There was a couple big themes going along here. First was the remembrance that a failed German economy helped create a fertile ground for Adolf Hitler. And so we knew that we needed to help Germany rebuild. The other key issue here was that the Soviet Union loomed like an iron curtain, more on that later, on the east side of Germany. And we felt like the better job we did of rebuilding Germany, the more of the hero we would look, and the less Germany would look to Russia or the Soviet Union to do the same. Look at the destruction pictures that you can see here, and you realize just how much had been destroyed. Remember we talked about at the end of the Civil War, all the reconstruction that the South needed, much thanks to William Tecumseh Sherman's march through the South, march to the sea. You can see these ladies moving brick after brick after brick. This lady here in the middle of the PowerPoint is just overcome with exhaustion. And basically the United States and the Allies, to a certain extent, showed up with everything the Germans would need to rebuild. Another key piece to this, and we'll talk about this more in the Cold War in the next unit, you can see the division of Germany. The United States, France, and Great Britain took the western 2/3, and the Soviet Union took the eastern 1/3. And our whole goal was to rehabilitate, reconstruct, and get Germany back on their feet again, whereas the Soviet Union had alternative plans. We did the same thing in Japan. We divided Japan amongst the Allied nations. You see the Soviet Union, the United States, even China taking a part of Japan. Our goal was to rebuild. Soviet Union's goal was to hold on to, but they never were as serious about keeping Japan as they were of Germany. You see a very interesting picture here on the lower left. This is Douglas MacArthur, the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Forces. Kind of an ego guy, probably didn't do as good a job maybe as he could have. You have to dig a little deeper to find out what some people think about MacArthur. But this is him in a picture next to the Emperor of Japan. Now, if you remember from the Japanese unwillingness to surrender part of the 12.3, Hirohito was seen as God on earth. And to have a picture of just some random American general standing next to the emperor as if they're equals was a really big deal for the Japanese people. And it kind of helped Japan move out of a older era and into a more modern government. And of course, you notice here on the bottom, what could be more modern in Japan but baseball? Some of the best baseball players in the American leagues today are Japanese baseball players, Japanese born, who grew up playing baseball in Japan and now play in the major leagues. That ought to show you just how much America was involved in the reconstruction of Japan. They've got a democratic government. They listen to Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson, and they play baseball. Maybe the biggest piece of this that we want to deal with, though, is the Holocaust. The Holocaust, of course, is a huge topic, much bigger than we're going to discuss here in the next 9 or so minutes. But Hitler had decided well before the war began that Germans needed living space. And one of the ways he was going to create living space was take the property of others and give it to the German people. Hitler's final solution, which you can see comprised a number of ideas and phases. The first phase was moving the Jewish inhabitants of Poland, France, Austria, Czechoslovakia, all his conquered territories into, first off, ghettos, walled off neighborhoods. Ghetto is the Polish term for neighborhood, and that's where they lived. He kept them under control, mostly lived life normally, but very quickly he decided instead to move these Jews from these ghettos to concentration camps created around Germany. Places like Dachau and Auschwitz were set up across the German Empire, and Jews were herded onto cattle cars, packed in tighter than cows even, and shipped in the heat or in the cold, without food, without water, to these camps. As soon as they would get off, they would be separated into two groups. The first group would be those who were deemed eligible to work. Maybe they were healthy, the right age, and those that would not be good workers. Children, the elderly, sick, and many of those would be instantly taken into a gas chamber. You can see in the bottom here, that was a gas chamber. They would be taken into these places, told to undress. Anything that of value was taken from them, gold teeth, glasses. A lot of times their head would be shaved. And they would be put in these chambers and gassed. You can see in this lower left, those are fingernail marks of victims in Auschwitz trying to claw their way through a concrete block, realizing that death was coming. And then the bodies would then be put into these crematoriums and burned. People in the surrounding communities would then be able to use this ash as fertilizer. Now, inside the camps, they had this interesting saying, Arbeit macht frei. If you work, you'll be free. So they put them to work doing all kinds of activities, whether it was wartime stuff like building grenades and making tanks, or producing food, whatever it was, the Germans intended to use them to help win the war effort. There's some pretty awesome stories of Jewish people risking their lives to create poorly malfunctioning weapons, grenades that wouldn't explode, bombs that wouldn't explode, at the risk of their lives. These concentration camps grew pretty quickly. You know, the Germans had decided early on that taking the time, as you see here, to just put a bullet in somebody's head and shoot them one by one was not very cost effective, nor was it very much of the assembly line that you need if you want to exterminate the millions and millions of Jews necessary. Plus, it was very difficult to find enough German people who were willing to do this. And so it became an assembly line of death in the concentration camps. Now, for the most part, the world didn't really know what was going on. They'd kind of heard some rumors, but they were mostly indifferent, unbelieving. No one could believe that a group of people could be so sadistic or awful or terrible. But as the war came to a close, and the Americans and the Soviets came upon these camps, it was pretty hard to deny the evidence. It was very hard for a lot of these American soldiers who came upon these concentration camps and saw exactly what was going on. I have here a couple links that you could look at. Inside Auschwitz, it's a YouTube account that can show you what things were like. This catalog archives is a about 20-minute video that the Americans created and then showed to the German people as a way to help them realize what they had allowed. Of course, there's some great movies Hollywood created. Schindler's List, The Pianist. You can see the list here. Just be aware that this is very mature material a lot. You might want to check with your parents and see if they're okay with everything. Anyways, as the American soldiers began to realize what had happened, we went from indifferent to angry. Very, very angry. We would then led to something called the Nuremberg trials and the creation of the word war crimes. You know, for centuries, people had been killing each other in wars, and there'd been awful bad stuff that had happened, you know, in every war. Soldiers do bad things to people, and they torture, and they rape, and they steal, but this was, it's to such a degree, such a different sort of an idea that the world created a new term, crimes of war. And we put some of these Germans on trial for war crimes. Now, most of the real big fish, so to speak, had already either killed themselves or been killed. Hitler had committed suicide. Joseph Goebbels had committed suicide. Heinrich Himmler had committed suicide. Probably the biggest fish that we caught was Hermann Göring, this German in charge of their Luftwaffe Air Force. And we collected all these people and put them on trial. We had a jury, we had lawyers, and we tried to make it as real a trial as possible, which meant that some of these people actually were set free. Most of them were imprisoned, and a few of them were executed. You could see Hermann Göring here going to his death by hanging. It was a very interesting time for us to decide what exactly is a crime of war. Was the person who built the factory that made the gas that killed the people in the concentration camp as guilty as the sergeant who flipped the switch on the gas? What about the captain who ordered the gas to be switched, or the general who ordered it, or the person who drove the train that brought the people there? It was very difficult for the world to decide exactly what a war crime was. But we worked very hard to prove that there was enough evidence to find these people guilty. As a side note, you'll find many people in certain sections of the world who believe that the Holocaust never happened. This ignorant idea, Iran is very big with it. It usually is an anti-Semitic idea. In other words, people saying, oh, those poor Jews, oh, they're feeling so sorry for themselves, they invented something called the Holocaust. Well, Germans are great at not only assembly line production, but they were fanatical in proving to Hitler what a good job they were doing killing Jews. So there's plenty of evidence. You can look and find that on your own time. The last thing we want to talk about after you do your DOK 12.4b, defend this statement, the Holocaust was a real event. And you might want to take a moment to look through some of the material that I gave you to see online. But it was the creation of Israel. In 1948, the world basically said, you know what? We did a bad job protecting the Jews. And we need to give them their country back. We need to give them Israel, Jerusalem. And you could see in this paper, or here, the state of Israel is born. If you look in this graph right here, this map, you can see lots of red. Those are Arab countries. And right in the middle is Israel, surrounded. The biggest problem with this was that Israel was already another country, Palestine, a country that the world had kind of created after World War I. And so there are lots of problems today between Israel and Palestine as these two groups of people fight over similar territory. It's led to lots of terrorism and etc. We haven't quite solved this problem. So that's the end of part 2, how America was different in 1946. So won't you be my neighbor?